Hello, everybody, and welcome to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, all the way from Wellington, New Zealand, I have El Presidente, Sue Hope. No, I'm just kidding. I have Sue Hope, the learning specialist, a learning specialist at Xero. And I'm super excited to talk to you today, Sue, because of what you and what you and your colleagues at Xero have done, which is implement something called meaningful meetings. So I'm just giving a little bit of a taster for people. But first, before we get into meaningful meetings, I want to ask, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Oh, thank you for inviting me, and I'm so happy to be here. So thank you. My virtual office, well, I have more than one office, but at the moment I'm sitting at home. Um, I'm up in my kitchen. I have a laptop, which, we can connect anywhere in the world, and I'm part of a global team. So I have colleagues in Australia, America, and the UK. And yeah, we connect through Google Suite, and we have Slack channels, and yeah, it's great. Xero is highly resourced when it comes to our tech, and because it is a tech company, so it's fantastic.
So that's lucky. So do you work from home most of the time, or do you work from an office most of the time, or does it switch? What does your working style look like?
It switches. I like to work from home at least once a week. We call that flexible working, but the rest of the time I travel into Wellington, into the city. Takes me about half an hour to commute. We have a big office there. There's about 800 staff, so I'm part of a team. Because I'm a part of corporate services, learning experience, all our customers are our own staff. We need to be in an office sometimes to connect with people. So yeah.
I can understand that. Now at the office, are there hot desks, or does everybody have their own desks? What does that look like?
We operate an activity-based working structure. So we have a locker, and then desks are allocated. I sit in a neighbourhood, so we often have the same desk, but that can rotate. And then, yeah, the software developers and engineers, it's all hot desking basically. Yeah, it's
Okay.
really good.
Okay. And what does Xero do for those who've never heard of it?
So it's a cloud-based accounting software company. We disrupted the accounting world a few years back, and we basically support small business owners to run their own accounts and bookkeeping. And it's all done in the cloud and online, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, I can imagine being a small business owner myself. Yeah, the accounting part is challenging and more challenging for some than for others, and for me, very challenging. So, and then how does Xero work together online? So you've got colleagues, in the US, you've got colleagues in Australia and New Zealand, you've got colleagues in the UK. So I'm gonna have to ask about time zones because that's the obvious question. But do you have to work with people with these people all the time, or is it more segmented into groups, into regions?
It's both. It depends who you are and where you sit. My team is a global team, so we have structures in place where every month we have a global team meeting, but then at other times we'll have regional meetings. So the New Zealand team will have a meeting once a week. Other teams are split across regions as well. And I suppose because we're a New Zealand-based company, the time zone that is our time zone is the one that's the dominant one, and that's somewhat unusual for people who are coming from America and the UK, which is often where the big companies come from. So at the moment, that's really challenging because our time zones are, and daylight saving means that the time zones are really wide. So we have to be really flexible and talk a lot about how do we work together well and create those sort of rhythms. So sometimes, like I am tonight, it's the evening and I'm talking to you, and other times I'll be getting up in the morning really early and talking to my colleagues in the UK. But
Okay.
yeah, I think it's a challenge. It's one of our big challenges, really, is how do you get that to work really well? Mm.
What are some of the things that you've tried? So it sounds like you're willing to stay up late or get up early. Is it the same with your other colleagues then?
Yeah, and it depends, like, as you know, people's lives and how they work. And Some people are rostered on to. We have help centres, so they work across time zones, for example. So some staff, for example, in New Zealand, start at 11 a.m. and they work through to maybe 8 p.m. so that they're covering Australia, that sort of thing. I think it's all about negotiation. So you need to find out whether people have families and can they do late at night, and you need to constantly be asking, does that suit? I think that one of the challenging ones we have as Australia is only 2 hours, right, often. And so if you set a meeting at 9 a.m. in New Zealand, that can be 7 a.m. for them, and that's not really going to work. So
Yeah, that's pretty early.
Yeah, we try and talk about thinking globally rather than thinking locally when you're trying to set these rhythms. And then what's the great thing is, though, you can dial in from a meeting at home, right? So in the morning or in the evening, that's why we have these flexible arrangements so people can connect and work through those time zone issues.
Yeah, I think it definitely remains a challenge because it's physics, right? We can't squeeze the world closer together. It's simply a physics problem. So it's not something that, if we just rearrange our teams, that it solves that. So time zones, I think, will always be challenging. Yeah.
Totally. Yep. And it's about creating that conversation within teams and people being empowered to say, actually, that doesn't suit me. Are we able to work through that? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges in a bigger team, or how do we get people to be comfortable speaking out about that?
Right. To be able to say, like, no, actually, that doesn't work for me. Yeah, I use my husband as an excuse because we have an agreement that I don't work before 9 a.m. or after 9 p.m. So in between, that doesn't mean I have to work 12 hours, of course, during the day, but it just means that within those 12 hours, I have to get everything done within that time. So, because before I was working a lot later and a lot earlier, depending on what was going on in the day. So yeah.
That's right. And, we want people to be able to make those decisions for themselves. And that's also part of that building teams, right? You need to all have that conversation and what's going to work.
So one of the things, though, that Xero is doing, it sounds like, is trying to get people to be able to work globally or flexibly or remote with each other in order to strengthen the company. And the reason why I'm having you on this podcast in particular is because this program that you have developed, that you and your colleagues have developed, called Meaningful Meetings, I thought was so impressive and has been implemented in such a fun way that I wanted to share it with the podcast audience because I think it'll really help people. So do you want to tell us about the history of how Meaningful Meetings started and what it is, and then we'll dive into what you're doing.
So it started in Australia. As a result of a restructure where some teams ended up having people in different locations geographically, and they were struggling with connecting and engaging, and how could they work together. And then I got brought into the project, which is often what happens. They make a request, and that's when I met you, Lisette, and I did your workshops, which was fantastic.
Plug. Yeah, take the Work Together Anywhere workshop, people. No, okay, and we're moving on. Yeah, but thank you.
And then there was a group of leaders in Australia called the Constant Reminders. Not sure where that name came from, but they called themselves a tribe. They'd already done a little bit of discovery and research about what was working and not working for them around meetings, and I basically injected myself into that group and said, I'm really keen to help. How do we make something happen? And so that's the history. And from that, we came up with this idea of curating a playbook to support people having more meaningful meetings, which was a term that we came up with in a brainstorm. And we didn't necessarily want people to have all the answers. We just wanted it to be a short playbook that people could get a few tips out of and choose one thing and then start changing and making different habits.
So what was some of the challenges about the meetings that to start with? What are some of the things that were going wrong?
People have no structure. They didn't understand why they were at the meeting. they had big meetings with lots of people, and then maybe the one person who made the decision wasn't there. People were distracted or interrupted. They always had their phones on them or their computers open. Some people were slightly bored. It's like, and then the other thing was times, like people were late or they ran over, or, you were always chasing your tail, really. And so they were a few of the things that we identified. I think also what was happening was the time zone issue, which we've discussed. And then that thing of how do I be more effective when I haven't met the person that I'm meeting with and I'm meeting them for the first time online or meeting teams online? How do I understand speed and pace, and what are the best techniques to use? So, yeah, that was some of the challenges.
Those sound like very common challenges for
Yeah,
businesses around the world. Indeed, that just meetings are terrible. Meetings in person are terrible. And then when you take them online, it's like going deeper into Dante's Inferno.
yep,
And the online meetings become really terrible.
yep,
So yeah.
definitely.
Okay. So you've developed meaningful meetings, and how does it work? So say I'm
So,
somebody and I want to improve my meeting. What do I do?
so we've got a playbook. It's a online tool, but I actually have a paper copy here.
Ooh, love
So
it.
it's a branded short 12 pages. It has 3 sections: tips and tricks before meetings, during meetings, and after meetings. Then it has a whole suite of resources that link to fantastic people all around the world who already create this stuff, such as yourself and Lucid Meetings and a few others. So we've also found some amazing people here in New Zealand, and we've basically borrowed their things and put them into a guidebook. And so people start there, and we've suggested that they choose 1 or 2 things to work on over a month. And we then have a Slack channel. And in the Slack channel, we get them to share their stories, what they're experimenting with, how's it going. We have sort of a conversation. We've also done a little bit of a campaign. So we've got into the marketing team, and we've created sort of 6 main themes, and we have those running on our television screens and things like that. So it just reminds people of some of the main points. So, for example, one of them is, at the start of a meeting, you should always check in with everyone. And so, it becomes sort of the key messages get flown through. And then we also created these little things, which are vinyls. And these vinyls stick onto the tables in meeting rooms. So we've gone around every office at Xero, and we have these little vinyls sticking on the tables. And that just is another way of doing the key messages. And then finally, we've gone and captured a whole group of people who are really passionate about this already. Some people might call them champions. And we've encouraged them to adopt something new, but also to catch other people doing things that are great. And we created this suite of stickers, which
This is
we've
awesome.
got.
So for those who are listening, Sue is holding up, you'll have to check the video. She's held up as an example of the vinyls and an example of the stickers, which look awesome.
And the stickers, there's actually 9 of them. And the idea with a sticker is we've used the theory of learning nudges, which, because I'm a learning specialist, I obviously like to have some theory around behavior change. And the idea with the champions is they're going to give the stickers out when they catch someone doing something really awesome. So, for example, one of the stickers is an agenda master. So when they get sent a calendar invite, it has the agenda already in it, and then the person checks in at the start and says, here's the agenda, this is what we're covering today, then they would earn the sticker of Agenda Master. And the sticker then gets put onto the person's laptop. So I don't know if this is common with other companies, but at Xero, everyone decorates their laptop lids with stickers, and it's become a thing. And so we're just building on that, right? So yeah, we've got a feedback guru, a speedy meeting whiz, a next steps pro, a kickoff expert, question savvy, a before the meeting master. So that's someone who's, nailed the intent, that when they invite people, they've planned it all and they've got that all humming. An engagement master. So that's someone who's made sure that everyone has an opportunity to contribute in a meeting. And then, another one is communicating intent. So we're rolling this out at the moment. It's exciting.
Yeah.
And each area and region in the world has an Alex team member, my colleagues, and they will also help getting these stickers out into the world, into the Xero world. And what we're hoping is people will start to go, oh, how did you get that? And then we'll have a little bit of momentum around encouraging people to adopt some new behaviours.
I really love it. So something as simple as a sticker on the back of the laptop can encourage people to inquire about, and also just gives them the extra, like what you said, the learning nudge to try something new, because
That's
meetings
right.
don't have to be bad. And like we were saying before, it's not rocket science in terms of making them better. It's most meetings, if you start and end on time, and if you have an agenda, then people will think that that's a good meeting. So
That's right. And our organisation is also very based around a strengths-based approach, and the positive psychology work that is around the world. And so rather than catching people and complaining about things that aren't working, what we're trying to catch is people doing things really well, and acknowledging that they've got a talent and a strength, and saying, yay, congratulations, here we go.
well, I can imagine that there's a lot of, that there's a lot of people out there that are wanting to add tools to their toolbox. And really what you're encouraging is just, hey, not every meeting is going to need a feedback guru necessarily, but geez, if you have that in your back pocket and you need it in a meeting, man, that's going to be really effective when you have it. So it's a matter of
That's
just
right.
teaching people new skills. And it sounds like this is just a fun way of people learning new skills around having online meetings, or even just
That's
meetings in
right.
general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we're starting small with this. We've just chosen a few things, and we'll obviously have to review it and see how it goes over the next few months. But I'm confident that we know that this will engage a lot of our staff. So, yeah.
So one of the things out that you've said that is that you found these champions, these sort of people that are just more excited than others about doing it. How have you found these people?
Mainly through talking to our business partners who work in people experience, which is the equivalent to human resources in other companies, and also people who perhaps have just self-identified. So they may have heard about us talking about meaningful meetings, and they've gone, oh, I'd like to be involved with that. And so then we'll say, would you be interested in doing this with your team? And they're like, yes. And then we give them a few briefing notes and off they go. Yeah. So,
Love it. So I'd
I
just
mean,
like to mention it because companies out there who are wondering like, oh, I wonder if anybody would be interested. And I'm thinking, yes, there are people within your company that are weirdly excited about learning about online meetings, and really give them the tools to run with it because they'll inspire others.
that's right. And, rewinding back to when we started this journey in February, we had a group of Australian, leaders. There's 12 or 13 of them who are in that group, right? And then once they've shared it with their teams, then there's always someone in those teams and who will share it with others. And it sort of just keeps rolling along like that, which is really helpful.
What
Mm.
are some of the ways that your meetings have changed at Xero?
It's still early days, but what we've noticed is there's more structure, which is good. People have adopted the idea of having a speedy meeting, which is a setting that you can do in Google, because we're a Google company, we use Google Suites. And you can set calendar invites to 25 minutes rather than 30 minutes, or 50 minutes rather than an hour. So there's quite a few people trying that. Um, the other thing we've noticed is, especially when you're doing remote meetings with groups, is people are trialing everyone being remote rather than having hybrid meetings. So I think we've found that to be really effective. It seems kind of weird to start with, especially when you have a group of people in one office. But when they've actually split up and are all sitting in different locations, we find people can connect actually a lot stronger, because they're all in the same space. So they all have to operate the same way, and you don't get those side conversations that often happen in a hybrid meeting. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's some of
indeed.
the things we've noticed.
And great hybrid meetings are difficult to do well for anybody. That's just the biggest challenge, because when you have people in person, it's just so much more powerful than when you also have people remote. So you have to have an excellent facilitator really who knows what they're doing, and a way to really connect the remote people in the room. So yeah.
And I think that'll be phase 2 of our project, is to look at that facilitation role and to grow experts in depth in that space, definitely.
Yeah, those types of meetings are needed. We can't always go all remote, though. I really love the idea of, yeah, let's just all go remote, because then we level the playing field and everybody brings a piece of the meeting room with them, instead of having sort of this uneven nature of it. Although hybrid meetings can be done well also. So not to
Yeah.
discourage hybrid meetings, but you need some extra attention on those. So
Mm.
one of the things that you were mentioning that I really loved before we started recording, you were saying that people are now canceling more meetings also, which I really love. So it's just sort of giving people the courage to cancel meetings. So I wanted to just allow some time to speak to that.
Yeah, I think we're encouraging people to obviously have the right people in the right time and the right place when they're setting a meeting. But we're also empowering and enabling people to say, actually, no, that time doesn't suit me, it doesn't work in my time zone. But also, if people cancel or someone can't come, don't have the meeting, because if they're the person or that needs to make the decision, there's no point having the meeting and then having another meeting because that decision maker wasn't there. Yeah, so I think that's starting, and I think we'd like to keep encouraging that. It's still a journey. We're still on that journey, but I
Yeah,
think New Zealand is in a time zone that can be really difficult for a lot of parts of the world, and so we're just trying to encourage people to have that conversation about what suits them around that flexibility and the time that they can connect. And that's all we need for people to have conversations, right?
right. The conversation itself will then happen, but it's a matter of all the logistics and organizing and planning it and actually designing something that's really productive, which is why we're meeting to begin with, is we either need to make a decision or we need to have a conversation about something. So
Yeah, that's right. And you know, I always talk about people having a gift of time. If we cancel a meeting, you've got time to do something else. So, you
yeah.
know, that's great.
Yeah, I do secretly wish sometimes like that some meetings get canceled. Like, oh yeah, I've got that extra 2 hours in my agenda. So yeah, but if you're thinking that, then maybe that meeting doesn't need to happen to begin with. But I love
And
that.
also,
Oh,
yeah, it's also about, you know, looking at meeting rhythms too. So, you know, there's lots of sort of, you need to make adjustments, and this is evolving, you know, so teams should always revisit how often they meet and when they meet and what their meetings are about, so that they actually work for them. You know, I mean, that's why we called our playbook a playbook and a guide. We're not mandating things for people, because we know lots of Xeros do fabulous things. We're just asking for them to have some improvements on what they're doing. So yeah.
love it. Because I think this is what I teach in all the workshops is there's no one right way to get remote working right. It's a series of little things that you adopt, and what works for your team and what works for your people. I mean, I wish there was a right way. I would be rich selling my silver bullet methodology for one right way, but alas, it's 100 right ways, which is also fun. Keeps it interesting. So we're running out of time, which is crazy. I feel like I've just got started, but I do have a couple of questions. One is, for other companies who are just starting out with this, what have you learned? What would you advise other companies to do? Because clearly everybody needs better meetings.
Yep.
So if they're also trying to adopt a meaningful meetings program, what would you advise them to do?
Um, Make sure you do a little bit of discovery and research. There's no point reinventing wheels. There's some amazing stuff that people are doing all around the world. So yeah, curate, steal, borrow, and don't reinvent. And secondly, start small. So, you know, don't it doesn't need to be 100% perfect. Just start. Like our playbook is by no means extensive, but it's enough to start with, and then you can build on that as you go. And I think then the other tip I'd have is to use people's strengths. So, I could recognise that the group in Australia, the Constant Reminder Tribe, had some amazing talented people in there, and we utilised what they were interested in and were really good at. And that helps me to then be able to deliver programs to their staff. So I think that was fantastic. And then, finally being curious, is an untapped skill. Asking people why they do the things they do, and I think you just got to keep being open to other ways and to seeing things, and you'll go a long way.
I have to say that's one of the things that I've learned from working with Judy Reese, who I've just recently introduced you to, is that there's a whole bunch of communication techniques out there that can help you be curious. If you're not a naturally curious person, for example, you can learn some effective communication techniques that will help you ask the right questions, so that even if you're not particularly curious, you know how to ask those curious questions to get at the bottom of those. So yeah, expand the toolkit for your meetings, because I think, like we were saying before, the competition is not that great. So if you really want to have awesome, meaningful meetings, there's only a few things that you need to implement. It's not rocket science, but you do have to do it.
Yeah.
So I
and I suppose that's the other part of, you can create a resource, but then you've got to have a group of people out there who are going to help make the change. And that's the biggest thing, is to rally some people around this. And then, my role is to keep promoting it and keep pushing it. And I call it a campaign. We're going to run this campaign for a year. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. We just have to keep persisting and keep encouraging people to try things and to make mistakes, but to also give it a go. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, your meetings won't come out worse for having tried this. That's the best part. Like, no matter what, your meetings are going to come out better. There may be a few explosions along the way, but overall, yeah, things are gonna work out okay. Well, I love the focus that you've put on this. I wish every organization would put this same sort of enthusiasm and focus into their online meetings. Think of the things that we could do. Think of all the time we could get back if we had great online meetings. I just think, think of the people that we could get together for solving important problems around the world. If we could just figure out how to do
exactly
as well.
I mean, my ultimate goal is to halve the number of meetings at Xero. That's a big goal, right? It'll take a while, but I think we could do it if we are really productive and efficient, and we have some really great systems in place for people to know how to just keep those meetings running along,
Yeah. And it can be a lot more fun when we're communicating better with each other. Then I think teams have more fun. That's sort of my focus is, how do we infuse a bit of fun into our work life? Because the best is when we enjoy what we do and the people that we work with.
I totally agree. Yeah.
So, yeah. So last question, which is, if people want to learn more about you and more about meaningful meetings, how should they get in contact with you?
That's a good question. Probably the best place is LinkedIn. I have a profile on there, so I would imagine if you connect with me there. Otherwise, we could probably talk about maybe putting an email address or something with the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely include the LinkedIn link in the show notes so that people can access you there. And then if you decide you want to add your email, dangerous, because you could get a lot of emails.
Spam,
yeah, a lot of spam. But we'll see. We'll talk about that. But thank you, Sue, for being on the podcast today and for sharing your story. I hope you inspire others to have better, meaningful meetings as well.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
All right, everybody. Until next time, be powerful.